introduce themselves now. Do you want to start with Alison, because you're next to me in the...
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Alison Bruce, and I write crime books set in Cambridge. So that's kind of my trademark location. I've written 7 in the Gary Goodhue series and 2 standalones. And my latest is The Moment Before Impact, which is a standalone. And I would like to hand over to Mike, who's on publication day. So congratulations, Mike.
Thank you, Alison. Yeah, I'm Mike Craven, writing as M.W. Craven, and it is publication day. Alison's quite right, for The Curator, out in all good bookstores, probably some rubbish ones as well. And I write the Poe and Tilly series, which some of you will be familiar with, some of you probably won't. And I also write the Avison Fluke series, which Little Brown bought off my previous publisher and published themselves in January. So I now have five books out with Little Brown as of June. I mean, this is the paperback of the hardback was released in June, so it's a well-established series now.
Wonderful. You've already got a comment, Mike, asking where your hat is.
It's on my head. What's going on again?
Too warm. Shall we talk about your reads of the year before we start getting questions in from the stream? Because Mike, you said Alison's one of yours, isn't she?
Yeah, I haven't done my top 10 reads of the year yet, but I will be. I normally do it a few days before Christmas, and Alison's will certainly be on that list. It's I was asked to read it by my editor. No, Alison, you asked me, didn't you? You asked me.
I did ask you, yeah.
And I said yes, of course. Of course I did. But there's always a sort of a worry when you read a book by someone you know fairly well, and I've known Alison a while now. In case you don't like it, really. I mean, let's be honest. But I absolutely loved it, and my wife, because we were sent e-copies, so I was able to send a copy to my wife as well, because she's an avid crime reader, Joanne. And we were sort of racing through it, sort of just edging ahead. And I mean, I normally get a bit more time to read, but she's a faster reader, so we were quite close. And she absolutely loved it as well. It was a surprising book. It sort of it took me. It took me in a direction I wasn't expecting it to go, which was absolutely delightful, and I really enjoyed it. It's a very dark book, but it was a very, very satisfying read, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Alison, who's in your reads of the year?
Well, Mike is, you see. Now that seems very contrived, doesn't it? Like we planned it beforehand. But I've read and loved The Curator, and I'm a big Team Tilly fan. I mean, Poe's great, but you know, it's Team Tilly for me all the way. So I've really enjoyed that.
You've read Dead Young?
I'm not finished yet. I keep being pulled off. I'm doing a job, you know, a real life job, working with the police actually, and I keep being. It's quite arresting. Takes me off in all sorts of directions, and so I haven't finished yet. But I'm loving it, and I love the opening. So I just Mike's books, they get you, you know. In the first couple of pages, you're in, and then so I've really enjoyed that. Ellie Griffiths' book, Postscript Murders. I've enjoyed that one. So I've been having a little bit of variety. Can't think what else I've been reading. I've got quite a list that I've been going through beside the bed. I just finished a Ruth Ware book. Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think who else. I might come back to that in a minute.
Fair enough.
I think my book of the year has probably been We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker. That pretty much blew me away, that book, and I'm a big fan of his anyway, but that was just astonishing, that book. It really was. And if it doesn't win the gold dagger next year, I'll be absolutely amazed. But I've read some corking books this year. Red Dog Press particularly are putting out some really good books. Helen Keast and Chris MacDonald and a few other authors that you people might be aware of. But it's been a good year for reading. I've read not as many as I did last year. I've read about 85, 86 books, which is, I normally read about 100, but I won't read 100 this year, I don't think.
That's so fast. I can't read it at that speed at all.
Do you want me to tell you how many I've read this year?
Well, yeah, well, exactly. I think I've done quite well with 85. Then I mean, there's a bookseller at Waterstones, and she's pretty much read more books in November than I read in the whole of the year. So as Caroline's going to say something like 200 or something, probably more.
I've read 330.
That's outrageous.
This year. To be fair, I was in lockdown, so I think it helps. But it's making a top 10 of the year list really hard because I've read some great books.
Well, this is the first year I've actually put everything down on an app, so I can actually go through at the end, and I'll say Fiona Cummins, she'll be on the list as well. With When I Was 10, it was supposed to be out this year, but it was put back till last year, and that's a phenomenal book as well. It really is. So I really
enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, she's a great writer anyway, but this is as a standalone. It was really, really sad as well, wasn't it? But for the first time, I'm gonna enjoy my top 10 little posts that I do at the end of the year, because I'll actually have a list to go through, so it won't be like me thinking, what books are, and go through my bookcase and think, when did I read this? Was it such and such or such and such?
So I want to talk character creation.
I've got a friend who reads slush piles for a living.
So who reads what?
I was going to say I've got a friend who reads slush piles for a living.
How many books does she read a year then?
She's in an hour and a half. Yeah, it takes her an hour and a half, and I've watched her do it, and she can do the full. Not what needs work with the characterization, how the dialogue is, how the plot is, how the subplots, and she's just read the whole thing in an hour and a half. It's phenomenal. So I'm like a week and a half at a push. I just can't read. I think I'm going to miss things if I read quickly, but she's obviously got it to a fine art.
Yeah, I think it's just a thing. I read quickly, but I don't know how I do it, but I do read it properly. I want to talk to both of you about your characters, because you've both created really amazing, sort of deep, interesting characters. Mike, you've got Tilly and Poe that are massive favourites in the group, haven't you? Alison, I read The Moment Before Impact, and I think the two sort of main characters in there are phenomenal. Like, I want to read more about them already. So how do you go around developing those characters?
Yeah, do you want to go first, Mike?
No, you go first. I think it's something clever to say then.
The two characters in the new book, I actually thought I was probably writing two characters that would feature in a series. At the moment, my editor doesn't think that they're serious character material, which I think is a shame, because I developed them with a longer shelf life, hopefully. So we'll see about that. But these two characters are Nikki and Celia, and Nikki is she's gone to university to explore a passion that she's got for CSI type work. Her father's a policeman, and she's grown up with an interest, general dislike of her father, but an interest in what he does. And she was planning to follow that, and her life completely derails. And then Celia is a semi-retired journalist who's reached the point where she thinks she wants to wind down and just write kind of puff pieces for magazines, but she's quite quickly drawn into finding out what's gone on in a much darker story. And I think the two of them work really well together. And I developed them over, quite often when you're writing one thing, it's easier to start for your sort of subconscious to start developing something else. So while I was working on my last couple of GoodTube books, these characters popped into my head. So they had a couple of years to grow. So I knew them quite well by the time I started writing about them.
I think that's the key, isn't it? people talk about like two-dimensional characters, and I think when characters appear like that on the page, it's because the author doesn't really know them. Now, you'll hear some authors try and explain this like that the characters are talking to them, and of course they're not. But you sort of get to know how they think in certain situations. So when I'm writing Poe and Tilly scenes, I know how Poe and Tilly will react to certain situations. So a lot of the time, it's just thinking of either funny things for them to come across. Normally, for Poe to be angry about and then Tilly not understand it or something, or frightening things or shocking things, and you sort of intuitively get to know how each character will react. So they sort of do take on a life of their own, as because they're inside your head, and as you sort of as they evolve inside your head, then they evolve on the page as well. So they don't. So Tilly now is not the same Tilly. Because I'm writing book 6 now. So the Tilly in book 6, and she just had to go to America to pick up a big maths award, and all she wanted to talk about during her speech was Poe. So that's the sort of Tilly bit that you can understand, but she's certainly not the Tilly that was in the puppet show that people will talk about. And Poe isn't the Poe that was in the puppet show either. The sort of angry, very violent sort of man that he was. So I mean, if you think back to the books that followed the puppet show, he hasn't actually hit anyone, whereas in the puppet show, he was actually very violent to some drunks in a bar who'd been abusing Tilly. So the characters they do sort of talk to you, but it's not in that weird way that you're sort of hearing voices in your head. You just understand how they would react and how they would talk, and that way they sort of become living embodiments of a little bit of your personality, I suppose.
So you say you don't hear the voices in your head, but I find that I think slightly differently when I'm writing from one particular character's point of view. So it's almost like, some characters might be more measured or whatever. So I find that my sentences are coming into my head more slowly and in a different way to when it's a different character. So it's almost like my thoughts have a bit of an accent or a bit of attitude.
Particularly when you're writing characters that are new, ones that your like protagonists are coming across, and because I sort of visualize everything first as if it's on screen, I do actually put the voices in the head, and then if the voice doesn't sound right or it sounds too similar to a character that's already been, then I'll play about with it in my head. And so in The Botanist, for example, I've got a sort of racist sort of troll on Twitter, and I put a character in. I initially wrote it as a sort of a very working class sort of Cockney woman, sort of all right, and it wasn't quite working when I was sort of listening to her talking. So I changed it to a more upper middle class. Oh, darling, you're so wrong about all this, that type of thing. And she calls everyone darling, even when she's being arrested, that type of thing. And that worked far better. And so you're right, but they're not actually talking to you. They're not saying, write this down. If you don't write this down, you're going to get horns or something ridiculous like that. I mean, we're not as mental as well, actually, I don't know how else you might be. I don't know. You might have a pile of dead bodies at your feet. Who is? So in fact, put your camera down. Let's see.
Possible.
But yes,
I think I'm sane. That's a worrying sign, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's nice, and also it's nice when you get to show a bit of development as well, and make it not obvious, make it so that the readers can sort of identify it without actually hitting them over the head with it. Because particularly British crime readers, are very intelligent readers, and they know when you're getting the procedural stuff wrong for a start, and they also know when a character is you just sort of you've got a cliche out there sort of back it, and you haven't put any work into it. I mean, they know they're very intelligent readers.
So if you visualize your characters, or you can live with them in your head for so long, do you have a clear picture of what they look like? So if you get the TV
Yeah,
rights
absolutely.
or the film rights sold, who's going to be them?
Well, I've got a very firm idea of what Tilly looks like. Poe is a mystery to me. He really is. And it wasn't. I mean, because the TV rights for the series were sold in 2017, and the actor that they want to play Poe is now who I see, because I thought, well, yeah, that's interesting. The actor's about 10 years older than he is in the books, but I thought, so that's who I see now. So that sort of face was given to me. The actor that they gave, that they put to Tilly, I thought, well, that's not how I see it at all. So I don't see their vision for Tilly. Their vision for Tilly is not my vision for Tilly, but certainly their idea for Poe is a great bit of casting, I think. And no, I'm not.
See, I always have photos. Do you ever use photos, Mike?
I did when I wrote Burial Gown. I think it was Rupert Graves. I think I had a little character sheet for Poe, but I didn't really refer to it, so I haven't done one since. And I don't have legends or anything like that, which is why I've got no idea what colour his eyes are. They've probably changed 5 or 6 times as the series have gone on.
See, I don't have photos for my main characters, but the characters in the book, although I did for Nikki, actually, but the characters in the book, that when I'm writing a series that turn up from book to book, I'll tend to put the characters up above my desk, and there'll be pictures that, well, when I was writing The Silence, there was a group of students, so I actually went on my stepdaughter's Facebook page and raided her Freshers Week photos, and to create all the student photos, and then I crossed them out. She came home at half term and saw her flatmate had a black line through her, and she said, "You've killed my flatmate, haven't you?" I said, "Well, you know, happens." So it can help me, especially in the early stages with characters that are not on the page a huge amount, to get to know them better, and to for me to use that as a starting point to help develop the character. So I find that quite useful. I also, so once I've decided on a character name, and I do think character names are quite important, because you know they can give you the wrong impression. You know, the instant first impression can be the wrong one. So when I've come up with a character name, I'll quite often Google that name and see who comes up on the internet. And quite often, if I've got a character name kind of rightish, the people that pop up will have the right kind of look. They'll look about the right age, the right kind of background. So that sort of tells me that I feel happier with the characters than when I know they kind of matched the names of real people out there. I don't do it the other way around, where I pick real people and name my characters after them, unless people ask me to. So I have a couple of times.
I mean, for The Botanist, I actually I was on this site, on this Facebook page, saying who wants to be a character, because I struggle with names, particularly ones that are on like half a page or something. That I really do struggle. So I've got I think there's about 10 members of the club are in The Botanist, and they might not make the final edit, because Howard, my copy editor, is always on. It's saying you've used this name before. In fact, when he was going through Dead Ground, he said, "You really don't like this woman, do you?" I said, "Why?" Because I said, "This is the 3rd time you've killed her off." Someone I used to work with. She was a bloke in Black Summer, I think she first appeared, and so yeah. So I struggle with names, just so I can come up with like all these weird plots and quite intricate things, and they're all linked. But if you ask me to name the postman who delivers Poe a letter, I'll sit there for 3 hours thinking. And I'll sort of come on sweats and have to put my hat on and all sorts of things. So I thought it was quite nice when the UK, I had about like 300 people said, "Yeah, me." So I was able to go down right here. So like people like Mark Dare and Karen Rollcross and all these people are in it. So that was quite handy. But for the bigger names, like the names that are going to be in the book and carry the book, I will spend a lot of time on them. And I particularly like the 3-syllable first name, 1-syllable surname. So Washington Poe and things like that. So I'll spend a lot of time on my sort of character, my genuine character names. It's the throwaway names that really throw me. They really do a ridiculous amount. I just can't do it. In fact, there's a book in The Botanist. I think I've listed the Newcastle United promotion team from whichever year it was, all the surnames. If you're a Newcastle fan, you'll think, oh, like Scott Sellers and Rob Lee and all these players.
Martin Edwards does
I was
that,
in hospital and I named all.
Martin Edwards names people after football players quite a lot in his books. Yeah.
It's an easy way of doing it. I mean, and as long as you're not being particularly nasty about someone, then there's no legal reason why you can't. But if you said,
I was in hospital and I named all my characters for one particular book after everybody in the ward. And I took all the first names and surnames and moved them all round one. And then I had a review afterwards says that she picks ridiculous names for her characters, but they were actually all real people that I'd spent a week in hospital with.
In fact, when David Majan had submitted the puppet show to Christina, our editor, the feedback, which ran into 2 sheets of stuff saying we would need this changed before we could look at a deal. One of the comments that Christina had was, why does everyone have to have a ridiculous name? But she said Washington Poe is fine. So Tilly's surname wasn't Bradshaw in the end. That was just something I thought, well, she doesn't want, and it wasn't, it was Dow Bacon, I think, as in DOWBAKIN. And for some reason she didn't like that. So I just picked up a really bland name. And I'm glad I did now, actually, because it sort of works. It works quite well. But it's funny, actually, because there was 2 pages of intense notes, and you'll know yourself, Alison, what Christina's notes can be like. They can be the smallest thing, and there can be massive sweeping changes. But I submitted The Botanist a couple of weeks ago, and she read it, and the only comment she had was a character at the end who snarled. And she said, "We could probably do better than the word snarled." And I thought that was it. That's one change. All right, I can live with that. I put growled.
Yeah, the first lot of notes I had off my agent years ago, they were all going really well. There were things like, page 3, paragraph 2 is a bit ambiguous, please reword. And this went on, and I was thinking, this is okay. And then it got to the last but one comment, which was, the end is rather inconclusive and doesn't entirely work. And I was like, okay. And then she said, the final comment, if so-and-so is the killer, what's the point of the whole book? So I threw away about 50,000 words and rewrote like mad. So, it's just this one little killer sentence that, but, you have to take it on the chin sometimes, don't you?
You do. When I got my notes back through for the puppet show, one of the things was that if you've read the puppet show, you'll know there's they dig up a grave because they suspect the person who's in the grave isn't actually who's supposed to be in the grave. But in the original scene that I wrote, Poe just went out with a shovel in the middle of the night and dug it up himself. And Christina said, you do need to have a look inside that grave, but why not just go through the proper channels and do all that type of thing? And in those days, I was like, I'll say, yeah, all right, because I just wanted to deal with Little Brown, obviously. And I'm glad I did now. And you listen to all these people who know far better than you do, and they're there to make the book better. I mean, and then it goes through all these processes, and every single person is just trying to make the book better. But I mean, I'm now starting to sort of not push back, but sort of question some of particularly the plot things, because I'm thinking sort of 3 books ahead any one time. So there was something in Black Sun my editor wanted to, not my editor, it was not Christina, it was Martin, my line editor. He said this bit needs to be taken out. It doesn't add anything to the story. And I said it doesn't, but it's going to be vital to book 3, so it needs to stay in. Which is quite handy when you work in sort of when in your mind you're working a bit ahead, but it can cause a bit of a headache for the person editing the book, who obviously doesn't know what you've got planned for 2 books.
So,
how about you? But I love the editing process.
I like it. I much prefer it than the writing process.
We've got a question on the screen from Samantha. She said, what scenes have you found the most difficult to write so far?
Without giving away spoilers, I suppose it was in the curator when Poe visits Flynn in hospital right at the end, and you don't know if that really awful thing has happened or not. Because Steph Flynn is such a strong character, and she really is. I didn't want her to be weak and vulnerable and a complete mess, but she had been through something horrific as well. So it was about getting that sort of balance right between sort of the strong person that readers know, but getting it right with someone who's actually just been through something that nobody should have really went through. So I struggled with that. And I think I did all right with it. I mean, if I was writing it again, I'd probably write it differently. But I mean, that's a writer for you. You don't really finish editing. You just decide to stop doing it. I mean, there's always something you'll change.
Yeah, you've got to hand over at some point. The scenes I generally find hardest are the ones that need to be there but are not so exciting. It's fine. It tends to be easier to write, for me, to write a scene that's kind of really dramatic or really confrontational or when there's high risk involved. But then sometimes you need scenes where they're important, otherwise they wouldn't be there, but less happens. And the challenge to make those interesting and page turning can be harder because if you write it right, you can make anything interesting, but some scenes just demand a bit of thought. The only scene I can really think that I didn't find it hard, but I felt really guilty over, it was the first time I murdered somebody. I developed this character that I really liked, and then I killed her, and I stopped writing for a couple of days because I felt really bad about it. But of course, the book wouldn't have gone anywhere if I'd let her live. It wouldn't really be the point. And then, after that, I've been murdering people quite happily, and it's not been an issue again.
But I mean, Alison's. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you write, particularly the way I write, I have key scenes in my head, and some of these scenes I'm really looking forward to writing. Normally, when Poe's having an argument with someone or someone's rubbing up the wrong way or something, and I'm really looking forward to getting to those scenes. But you got to write a couple of scenes before, and they just seem a bit, because you know what's coming and you're dying to get to that, and then you've got to describe. Like tomorrow I'll be describing what a church graveyard looks like, and that'll take me all day to do, and it'll be a boring scene, but it's got to be done because of what's going to happen after. And I won't enjoy doing it, and it'll probably take me all day, and it won't flow, and I'll struggle to write 500 or 600 words. But the day after, well, it will be Monday. I don't write weekends. I'll write 2,500 words because I'm at the scene where Poe's having an argument with a gravedigger and all these things that I've been looking forward to doing. So yeah, they are difficult scenes to write, because if it's boring to you or you're struggling, then often it's a boring and a bit struggling to the reader as well. So they're the bits you end up editing a lot, I find. Anyway, it's when you're like you're basically writing as fast as you can type. They're the scenes that stay in pretty much as they are at the end, I find.
I don't know, actually, that when I read back, I can't tell, unless I happen to remember, I can't tell which scenes I had a tough time writing and which scenes were more straightforward. When I read back, if I've got the scene right, I don't think, oh, this was hard to write, or this was easy to write. It's just in that moment of writing it, some are much tougher than others. You have got a comment here, it's made me smile. Steph Flynn is awesome, one of my favourites. She's like one of those characters that is there, and then afterwards you think, I really like it every time she's on the page.
Yeah, I mean,
it's Lucy who said that.
All right, okay. She's one of those characters who has sort of developed, and as Poe has sort of calmed down a bit because of Tilly's influence, because Poe and Tilly are sort of now like a terrible twosome in a way, and they're getting to more and more bother. She's getting more and more sort of agitated with them, so she's becoming the real grump of the team now, I find, which is delightful. Really, she's a really fun character to write.
Do you listen to music, Alison, when you write? Because there's a question here, and I think it's directed at Mike from South Florida, I'm guessing, South FL Pyrotechnics. Does it help to listen to bands like The Damned, 999, The Cure, and Bauhaus while writing about fictional crimes?
I absolutely adore listening to music when I'm writing. I tend to find a song that represents the bit I'm trying to write about, and I'll have that one song on repeat until I finish that section. So I have played a song back to back for 700 plays, 800 plays before. So I have the same song on, and it stops me. It's two things. One is that if I feel strongly enough about the song, then what's going on in the song kind of really motivates me and sort of spurs me to have a lot more creative thoughts. And the other thing is that it blocks out the little voice in my head that says things like, you should go and load the washing machine and things like that. So it stops me getting distracted by things that are going to take me away from the writing. So yeah, absolutely swear by it.
Yeah, I have to have music on when I'm writing, and it's got to be. I like all sorts of music, but I'm predominantly a punk. So there's always punk on at some. So I mean, I absolutely listen to the Damned, and I listen to 999. I listen to the Anti-Nowhere League, and the Sex Pistols, and the Clash, and the Buzzcocks, and Stiff Little Fingers, and I could go on all day. I also listened to a bit because I was a punk. Actually, I grew up at the time when punk was a thing, and also it was when punks and or greasers, as we call them, but heavy metal fans didn't really get on. So I didn't really listen to any heavy metal because it sort of wasn't allowed. Motorhead was the sort of crossover band. So I've now discovered all these heavy metal bands, and I'm sort of getting involved in their backlist. So AC/DC, and I'm a big Iron Maiden fan now, and Metallica and Guns N' Roses, and all some of the bigger ones and some of the smaller ones as well. So it's good. But I always have music on. It's always as loud as sort of my concentration level will allow, and that'll vary depending on what sort of task I'm doing. And I can't have the radio on for some reason, because as soon as someone starts talking in the same room as me, I'll just start listening to whatever's happening. Because my wife and I have, because she has been working from home. I mean, I've worked from home for a while now, and she prefers listening to the radio. And because we were sharing my office for a bit, I found it quite distracting. And then I was also getting involved in her telephone discussions. I was sort of listening to her instead of writing and things like that. So it was one of those sort of lockdown things. You find a compromise like you do. Normally when sort of Slayer or Pantera comes on, I would just automatically fast forward it so that Joanne didn't have to listen to it.
Fair enough. Are you ever tempted to publish like a playlist that goes with your books? Of like things you were listening to?
I've got, for the simple fact that Michael Connelly did it, and I think he does it really. And I've listened to Michael Connelly's jazz playlist on Spotify, and it's a really cool idea. But I don't think I would. I don't have the technical know-how to do it anyway. But I don't think anybody wants to listen to the nonsense I'll listen to.
I've got a playlist in my Good Hugh books. There's a playlist in the back of every book, and it's the 10 or is it 12 songs I've listened to most when I've been writing that book. Because of course, if you listen to a song for 700 times when you're writing a particular scene, that kind of song belongs with that scene. I can't use it to write another scene because I just picture what I wrote before. So my Detective Good Hugh has a jukebox, and they are the songs on his jukebox. But that's a spoiler because you don't find that out till book 7. But they're the songs that have kept me company while I've been writing books. And they're mostly not all songs that I like. Sometimes I'll hear a song on the radio that just really fits the mood of the book. Mostly they're songs I really feel strong about. And they're mostly 50s based, rockabilly, doo-wop. Sort of 50s R&B and things, that sort of mixture. Not everybody's cup of tea, but it's mine.
I mean, I met Dan. He when he writes, he puts his headphones on and listens to the Dark Knight soundtrack, and that's what he does. And he just puts his thing on because his character, he sort of calls him the Dark Knight of Bradford, and that's just what he does. I mean, so it's. I think most writers do. I think the silence is a bit of a creativity killer for whatever reason. I don't know why that is. I suppose Tilly could tell you, but I certainly couldn't.
Shona Blair Roughsedge said, has either of you come to dislike any of the characters you've included in your stories, and how did you deal with that?
You can write about a character so long that you can go off them. I'm not quite there yet. There's some characters that I've got a couple of characters that I dislike strongly, but I want my readers to dislike them strongly too. So that's quite fun to write about them. I think when you're writing a series, you can reach a point where it's refreshing to have a break and go and spend some time with some other characters. I certainly haven't fallen out with any of the main characters that I've written about, so I haven't had that experience yet.
Other than characters who you're supposed to not like, the only one, and I'm going to apologise to Lucy before I say this, probably Steph Flynn, and I don't mean that I don't like writing about her. She's sort of now getting in the way a little bit, in that when Poe and Tilly, because there's always Poe and Tilly now, they're always together. When they are interacting with, say in Dead Ground, there's an FBI agent that they're working with, and she's sort of becoming a bit superfluous. I'm struggling to find meaningful things for her to do, so I might have to have a think about where I put her in the future, and then use her a bit more sparingly. So I don't dislike her, but I'm finding her a bit like Edgar, actually, the Poe's dog. I mean, if anyone was a character not to be liked from a writer's point of view, it's that bloody dog, because readers always want to know where he is, and if he's not, if I haven't explicitly said someone's looking after him, people will assume he's been abused by some sort of puppy farmer or something like that. So it was getting to the point where I had to say that he's fine, he's on a farm, he's got access to fresh water, he's been fed 3 times a day. Well, don't worry about him, that type of thing. Oh, but you haven't walked him. Just assume I have walked him. I haven't written it down, things like that. But when the puppet show was on submission, my agent read it first, and he said it's not clear on page something who's looking after Edgar. It doesn't matter, but okay. So I went and I changed that. Christina said it's not clear on a different bit who's looking after Edgar at this bit, and I was like, well, Christ, right, I'll change that as well. So we got all the way through, and then it went through about 7 different processes, and right at the end, Howard, my copy editor, said, you do realize the timeline you have set up, Poe joined the police when he was 11 years old. I thought, well, that's something that probably needs to be fixed. Never mind all these like supposed professionals in the industry who are worried about the dog. How about like getting the fact that Poe joined the police when he was 11? We'll get that bit right first.
They're all dog owners, though, aren't they?
Yeah,
Christina and David.
You can't kill a dog. You just can't do it. And I wouldn't. I would say. I have a Springer Spaniel myself. I certainly wouldn't kill Edgar. I mean, I thought would never cross my mind, but it can be quite difficult. That you've always, in the back of your mind, you've always got to think people will want to know that he's okay. He doesn't have to be on screen. They just need to know he's actually, Poe hasn't just abandoned them.
What are you both working on at the moment?
You want number 6, Mike? Did you say?
Yeah, I'm writing. I started Poe 6 on the 1st of December. I start the new Poe book 1st of December every year, and I'm about 7,000 words into it now. A bit of a slow start, then I'll speed it up, then I'll slow down again, and I'll be describing the graveyard tomorrow, and that'll be a slow day. But I'm hoping to finish this one quite early because I want to try and write 2 books next year. I just signed a new contract, and one of the books that, because it's normally we normally go 2 books at a time, but Christina bought a standalone thriller I wrote in. It was before I was published, so about 2014 maybe. A sort of US set, bit of Jack Reachery type stuff. it's got a provisional publication date of June 2024, but I think that will be bumped for post 7. But provisionally that gives me a sort of whole year where I don't have to write anything. But next year I want to write 2 books, so I'll finish post 6, which is called The Mercy Chair, and then I'll have a go at either something new, or I'll maybe write a 3rd fluke book. But that depends on what my agent does in America, because he's trying to sell something in America right now. And if he does, I'll have to write a 2nd book in that series.
I'm just finishing. Let me show you earlier. That's the new one that came out in October, and this goes into paperback in March. And I thought I'd probably be writing a follow-up to that, but actually I'm writing the first one in a new series featuring a character called Ronnie Blake, who does move to Cambridge, but whereas my detective loved Cambridge, she's not impressed at having to move to Cambridge. She's heading up a new missing persons unit, or taking over a missing persons unit, actually. So I'm starting on the first book in that series, and then they're in the process of signing me for 3 more in that series, so that's going to be 4 books.
Excellent.
That's good news. Ruth Murphy says, will you both be taking time off at Christmas?
Yeah, I'll be finishing when Joanne finishes, and I'll start again when Joanne starts again. So I'll probably best part of 2 weeks, maybe slightly longer. Although as a writer, you sort of never stop when you're writing a book. I think Mark Billingham said this first. When you're writing a book, you're never not writing a book. If you're not physically writing it, you're thinking about it at all times. So I'm always like sending myself emails and things, and like I'll wake up 3 in the morning. I'll just thought of an amazing line and I'll write it down. And in the morning, I'll go, what the hell was that? So it's not a break in the genuine in the real sense of the word, but I won't be writing.
Yeah, I will be. I've been working on this. I mentioned it earlier. This policing project, and I'm trying to move house at the same time, which is why I took a proper job for a bit to get the mortgage sorted out so I could move house. So I've been juggling lots of things. I had got the new book was sort of underway when the idea of doing this series came up. So I've had to rejig the plot, throw away a lot of it and keep some of it, so that it becomes the core of the new book, which is called Because She Looked Away. And so really my big catch up is over Christmas, so that I can get back to where I would have been if I hadn't restructured it with this new character. And incidentally, it caused quite a ripple, because I started a book title with the word because. So there was a big debate about whether that was allowed. So I've got a book starting with because.
Cool.
It depends how you it depends on the words that follow, I suppose, isn't it? I mean, you've read the first lines of Poe 4, Alison, and that's not the usual way to start a book at all, is it? Talking about a monkey called
No, this is very engaging.
You've got a request for a 3rd fluke novel here, Mike, on the stream.
Yeah, well, if whoever said that imagines that's the first request for a 3rd fluke novel, I'd one from the bloke who does the narration today. He said, I'm dying to do the 3rd one. There's 2 things stop me, actually there's 3 things. I don't have the time, is the first one. Little Brown, my editor, wants a fluke book every year, and at the minute it's taken me best part of the year to write a book to the standard that I'm happy with. The second reason is I'm not sure there's an actual that my editor would actually want it, because I really don't know what the sales figures have been. I mean, I think they're all right, actually. I think the contract's earned out, actually, which is quite nice. But I don't know that they would be that bothered about publishing one. And the third reason is I haven't really got a finalised idea what I would do with the way I ended Body Breaker. I mean, it sort of absolutely needs to be a third book in this series. I mean, I appreciate that. I can't really just leave it where it ended up, because I never intended to. If you know both series, the puppet show, the sort of the skeleton of the plot of the puppet show would have been the third Fluke book. So if you know both series, you can probably pretty much guess which characters would have filled each role in the puppet show from the Fluke series. But I sort of got a very rough idea that it might involve Towler's baby in some way, and maybe Towler being arrested for the murder of his mother, or the baby's mother, or something like that. Or daughter, sorry, she's not a baby anymore. I mean, it's 2015 since I've even looked at a Fluke book. So yeah, it is a combination of things. But next year, like I say, I'm hoping to write 2 books, and one of them could well be the third Fluke book. And then but certainly I want to have 2 competing series. If I'm going to carry on with the Fluke books in any sense at all, Fluke won't be a cop anymore. I might, if he survives, obviously, because he might not survive, that might be the easiest way to sort of solve that problem. It would be a PI or something with Towler, because people do like Towler. I mean, and he was such a fun character to write as well.
Alison, I know you said that you've not got a contract to carry on the series or make a series at the moment before Impact, but would you be tempted to have like a short story on, or a novella about like Celia or Nikki?
Yeah, I've got a couple of short story ideas. I mean, the Nikki removes tattoos for a living, as well as going back to study more about crime and investigation. She's actually doing the degree that I just completed this year. I did 3 years of crime and investigation at Anglia Ruskin University. So, there were loads of story ideas that came out of doing that course, but also because she's removing tattoos, I think, the reason people want tattoos removed is more interesting than the reasons they had for putting them on in the first place. So there's a real opportunity there for her to be coming across people who don't want to take an issue to the police, and to go somewhere with it. So I've just done a short story, not with them, but I've just done another one, and I have kind of got the bug a bit. So I think I'd like to do 3 or 4 short stories with them and see if I can persuade Little Brown to maybe do another Celia and Nikki book, because I think it's got potential. The reason they said not was that those characters were so invested in the story that happened in this book. They didn't think they would be so invested in another story, because they wouldn't be, in jeopardy. It wasn't affecting their lives so much. But then that's pretty much the case with.
They were personally involved in the events, weren't they? In the moment.
They were.
But so I mean, I assumed it was going to be the first book in the series. I was looking forward to the second, so I was a bit.
Yeah, that's what Howard said as well.
When you told me that perhaps it wasn't going to be happening. So.
No, Howard said, "Oh, I love this. I think it should be a series." And I've had that feedback quite a bit. So maybe it's just not just yet.
Maybe we just need to send our comments into Little Brown and say we want more of them as readers.
Yeah, that would be lovely. I'd really enjoy writing more about Celia and Nikki. I think there's mileage there.
Isn't it? You can't just write it and then hope that they'll buy it, because it's like with a Fluke. For me, I could not afford to take 6 months, a minimum of 6 months, to write a Fluke book on the off chance that if I didn't know for a fact that it would be sold at the end, because I mean this is what I do for a living, so I can't work for 6 months for nothing, and you'll be the same. Because if I've had the time, and hopefully next year I'll have the time, and I can convince Christina to buy a third Fluke book, then I'll do it. If I get the time, and my time is largely dictated to by other forces at the minute, because this other series that I wrote sort of by accident. I wrote to my lunchtimes when I was in probation, actually. I mean, that's the fact. But that's coming out soon, and that might be the one that they sort of want another book for. So it's really not entirely up to me what I write next, other than there will be one fluke book a year for the foreseeable future.
So Mike, you might have been asked this before, but I'm going to ask you one of the group's favourite questions, which is, what are your most memorable moments as an author?
Winning the Gold Dagger. I'd be churlish to say that it wasn't, and it was such a surreal night. In fact, it was such a surreal 6 months, because we were at. In fact, you were at Crime Fest as well, weren't you? In that May in 2019, and we were going out for dinner that night for the DHA, because we're the same agency as well, Alison, as well, the same publicist. We were going out for dinner that night, and the secretary of the Crime Writers Association had grabbed me, and she said, "Are you going to the Daggers long list announcement tonight?" And I said, "I wasn't going to. I'm going out." And she said, Are you going to the long list tonight?" And I said, "Well, I've just answered that question. Are you sort of deaf?" without being overly rude. And eventually I got it through to me that perhaps I should go to the thing. So I got long listed. I didn't even know I'd been entered, and I got long listed for the Gold Dagger, which is a complete shock. And I was so convinced I wouldn't make it off the long list that I didn't bother paying any attention to when the shortlist was announced, which was just after Harrogate. And it wasn't until someone from Shots Mag actually sent me a congratulations tweet. I thought, what for? What have I done? So on the night of the event, the big gala dinner in London, I absolutely wasn't expecting to win, particularly when my agent David had said, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "Well, I'm not really." And he said, "Well, I think you're going to win." He said, "Black Summer's a brilliant book." And I said, "Black Summer's no, you idiot. It's the puppet show." And he went, "Oh shit." Yeah, actually swore more than that. So I thought, well, I'm definitely not going to win. So I just got on with enjoying the night. So, and because it was sort of the last one that's announced of the night where you don't actually know who's won, it was about 11:15, maybe even after 11. So, and we've been sort of drinking since 5 o'clock. So my speech, if you can find it on the internet, it was an absolute disaster. But yeah, that's the best moment I've had as an author. But they've all been. I mean, there's been nothing bad. I mean, it's a very good way to earn a living. There's no way of pretending otherwise. I mean, this year has been. While I've been acknowledging that it's been awful for some people, and some people have had a real hardship, and financially and emotionally, and all the other reasons why COVID has been a horrible year. I've just sat and cracked on and just gone with it because I can. I thought it'll be a bit churlish for me just to say I'm too upset because of COVID. I mean, I'm one of the lucky people who can just carry on. So I just knuckle down. So I've had a productive year. I've written 5 short stories and a novella. The novella will be out in 2022, and a novel as well. So that was a long answer to a short question, wasn't it?
Alison?
Oh, I suppose actually the first thing that comes into my head, although I did have, when I was shortlisted for the Dagger in the Library, I didn't know anything about it, and people kept saying, "Oh, congratulations," and I didn't know what I was being congratulated for. It kept popping up on Twitter. But no, my favourite moment is when my 3rd book came out. It was the first book I wrote, and so I started writing in 1989. It took me absolutely ages because I didn't know what I was doing. It took me years to finish the thing because I kept throwing it away and starting again, because I was going, "Oh, that's not right." And actually it came out as the 3rd one in the series, which was my 5th book overall, because I'd had 2 non-fiction books out. And it was at the book launch for that book where I had the feeling that I'd finally had my first book published, because it was this book that had been with me for 22 years by then. And that moment was, you imagine when you get your first book published, you're going to have this feeling of, "Oh, I'm holding my book," and this intense satisfaction. But I didn't feel that until the 5th book. And then I looked and I had a row of books, and it actually felt like I could call myself an author because I had five books out, and I felt, I wasn't an imposter then. So that was a really magic moment for me.
Yeah.
Nice. Sam says thank you for your contribution to Criminal Shorts, Mike.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. I mean, that was a. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that story. It was a Stephen King competition, so I'm surprised it was allowed in actually, because it was more horror than crime. But I was delighted to be selected at the end. And I've read probably about half the stories now, because I dive in when I can, and I'll probably finish them over Christmas. And there's some serious talent in that lot. I mean, some really, really, really good stories.
Yeah, there's some cracking ones in there, isn't there? It's our charity anthology. Alison, sorry, I just realised we were having a conversation about.
No, I do know about it. Are you planning on doing another one?
Maybe. It's not. Kath and Will, our admins, are the ones who did the major legwork on it. I had very little to do with it other than contributing the cover photo.
Yeah, I'd love to contribute the story if you do one again.
Yeah, we'll send you a message if we do one again.
Brilliant.
I think it is in the plans, but we'll see. Do you want to? We've only got a
It's
few.
really difficult, actually.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, when you write a short story and you haven't got a home for it, the short story I've just written, it might come out as in the paperback as a sort of extra at the end, but at the moment it's a bit long and I haven't found a home for it, and so I'm feeling like I've got this thing that I want to get out there, and I haven't found the opportunity yet.
Speaking of short stories without a home, if you go to Tesco, there's an exclusive short story in the back. I don't want to push people away from Independence and Waterstones and things, but it's quite a funny story where Tilly drags Poe to a murder mystery evening at Christmas. It made me laugh anyway.
See, I saw that today, and I have a copy of The Curator, and I wanted to go and buy another one just to read the short story.
Well, you should. Yeah, my account would there. Thank you.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. Do you want to remind us both about your novels before we sign off? To give us a recap about yourselves and your novels, especially the moment before Impact, as well as
the moment before Impact. It's following the events following a horrific car crash, and things might not be exactly what you think they are. I would just add that I did an incredible amount of research on car crash injuries, seatbelt injuries, what was viable and what wasn't. And I was lucky enough to work with a senior forensic pathologist who helped me with a lot of that. So, I mean, I always try and research things really well, but I'm quite proud of this book, actually. And it's available in hardback. There's signed copies with Goldsborough Books in London, or from your local bookstore.
It's a seriously good book as well. It really is. And the book I have out now is the Curator. Next year's Dead Ground will be revealing the cover very soon, probably this year. And I've agreed we'll do it on the UK Crime Book Club. And just actually for the ones the people want to know about Fluke does get a mention in Dead Ground, and also there's Steel Eye Stan, the one-eyed bouncer, the guy who puts a ball bearing into his eye because he loses his prosthetic eye in fights. He's actually in Dead Ground, so I have actually merged the two worlds. So that's something that'll be a bit of fun for people, but we'll have more details soon. We're going to get the paperback release out of the way of the Curator, and then we'll go full steam ahead for Dead Ground.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks. Good a host as ever.